This is True Spies, the podcast that takes you deep inside the greatest secret missions of all time. Week by week, you'll hear the true stories behind the operations that have shaped the world we live in. You'll meet the people who live life undercover. What do they know? What are their skills? And what would you do in their position? I'm Rhiannon Needs, and this is True Spies from SPYSCAPE Studios. Cold Snap. October 1965. Thousands of feet above sea level. From a distance, this mountain is a thing of magisterial beauty. But for the men attempting to climb it, it's a frozen hell on earth.
They can barely walk, snow's up to their thighs.
The climbers have been ascending the mountainside for days. Every hour is a losing battle.
Everybody's complaining of dizziness, headaches, nausea. And while they're sort of dealing with this sickness, they're trying to progress up the mountain step by step.
But things can always get worse.
The weather completely goes haywire.
A radio crackles into life. An order, issued from safer ground, bursts through the static.
Come down immediately and leave all the equipment.
Sensible, no? In these conditions, it doesn't make sense to carry excess weight. Leave the tents, leave the poles, leave an extraneous backpack or two. It's only stuff, after all. But miles below, back at camp, things don't look so simple. As one coordinator gives the order to abort, another looks on, aghast.
He yells at him, "What are you doing? You can't leave that device up there. It's dangerous."
You see, this is no ordinary climb. And that was no ordinary climbing gear.
There is a nuclear device with a third of the plutonium that was used in the Nagasaki bomb just sitting out there somewhere. Unknown location, dangers unknown.
Officially, none of this ever happened. But over the years, the stories popped up here and there, sparking intermittent bursts of outrage before drawing back into a mire of rumour, obfuscation and omission. But in 2025, this old tale was finally given a proper telling. For that, you have this week's guest to thank.
I'm Jeffrey Gettleman, a global correspondent for the New York Times.
In 2018, Jeffrey was posted in New Delhi. It was there, from a brief mention in an Indian paper, that he stumbled across a scandal, the political and environmental ramifications of which still echo in the present. Immediately, he and his colleagues sprung into action. A long and winding investigation that took them to remote corners of India, as well as on a surprising trip to the Pacific Northwest. But that's a story all on its own. We'll tell it in a members-only debrief with Jeffrey over on SPYSCAPE Plus. Right now, we're telling a spy story. What do we know so far? Well, in 1965, a nuclear device was lost on a mountain. How did it happen? Why was it up there in the first place? And where is it now? Before we answer those questions, you'll need a bit of context. In the mid-1960s, the Cold War is at sub-zero. The USA and Russia are fighting a shadow war, with allies and proxies around the globe. But there's a new player on the board.
So in the 1960s, China was trying to emerge as a nuclear power, and the United States was very concerned. In the early 60s, there was just a couple countries that had nuclear weapons: the United States, the Soviet Union, Britain, and France. And there was a lot of concern that China was rapidly building up a weapons program. In 1964, the Chinese detonated their first atomic bomb.
The 22-kiloton explosion put Washington on red alert. A second communist power was now capable of destruction on a cataclysmic scale.
It took the CIA and the American intelligence community by surprise. how advanced the Chinese had come. And there was then this scramble in the United States security establishment. We have to get eyes on China. We have to monitor what they're doing, how they're exploring ballistic missile technology, how quickly their nuclear program is advancing.
Obviously, the need to collect intelligence on this new member of the atomic club was paramount, and it had to happen quickly. The agency had precious little human intelligence out of China, and a new operation could take months or years to establish inside its borders. But as luck would have it, space-age tech was making long-range surveillance easier than ever.
So there were two big technological developments in the early 60s that made this mission possible. The first one was the advent of telemetry.
Telemetry is the science of receiving data at a distance from a fixed location. In this case, it meant
being able to pick up radio signals from very far away from missiles flying through the sky. American intelligence agencies figured out how to do that in the late 50s, and they set up a ring of detection stations around the Soviet Union to track all Soviet missile tests. They then wanted to apply that to China. So that was a very interesting new technology called TELINT, telemetry intelligence.
But China's a big place. The Lop Nur testing station, where the CCP had detonated its first nuclear weapon, was deep inside its borders. Any telemetry station operating outside of China would need to be able to cover a huge range, with a minimum of interference from radio sources on the ground. They needed height. Serious height. The Himalayan mountains, which watch over China from its southwestern border region, had height to spare.
They needed to establish a surveillance station at the top of one of the tallest mountains in the world.
But that idea came with its own set of issues.
That would be impossible to have any personnel up there. They needed to set this thing up and leave it behind because it's too cold and inhospitable for people to survive up there. And the question then was, how are you going to power it? You can't use fuel because there's no way to keep enough fuel up there to power it for years. And even this new technology at the time of solar panels wasn't practical at the top of a mountain. And even for spacecraft, the solar panels were too big and heavy.
So what to do?
At the same time, scientists working in the space program developed these portable nuclear generators, which could be a power source for the first generation of satellites and spacecraft. They came in different sizes, some as small as, let's say, a beach ball.
These generators were fueled by plutonium, an unstable element most famous for its use in the atom bomb that destroyed Nagasaki in 1945. That very instability, the element's gradual decay, could be used to generate power.
And that device is like an everlasting battery. It can power electrical equipment or the sensory gear on a satellite for decades, or even longer.
The US government called them Systems for Nuclear Auxiliary Power, or SNAP for short.
It was, how can we get a sensor up there to watch what China's doing? And how can we power that sensor? So these generators were the answer. And that's how this mission started.
The Himalayas stretch across several nations, but America isn't one of them. So the CIA needed an ally with access to the peaks. India fitted the bill. While the country hadn't officially taken a side during the Cold War, recent bad blood with China, with whom India shares a land border, provided an opening for collaboration.
India and China have fought a border war in the 60s. Short border war in the Himalaya region. China wins, they take territory. The US is trying to have a stronger relationship with India because in this black and white world of the 60s, where either you're with the US or you're with the Soviet Union, there was a real emphasis on trying to get developing nations to join your side. And the US did not want India going to the Soviet side. So you had this triangle with China, India, and the US. India and the US shared some interests, but they weren't necessarily close allies, and they didn't totally trust each other. And so that was the backdrop to this mission of how can we spy on China with the help of India.
A joint operation between the CIA and the Indian Secret Service, transporting a nuclear-powered sensor several thousand miles above sea level. It's toweringly ambitious. But there's a key element missing. Namely, someone who can coordinate a high-risk expedition in the world's tallest mountain range. You're going to need a climber. And that simple fact is how this mission really began. The year is 1964. At a cocktail party, somewhere in America, Barry Bishop is mingling.
Barry Bishop was this famed mountain climber. He had just summited Everest, which again, in the 50s and early 60s, only a handful of people had made it to the top of Mount Everest. This was a whole new field of high-altitude mountain climbing that was brand new and untested.
This handsome 30-something looks every inch the dashing adventurer. He's expounding on the majesty of the Himalayas to an older man, heavy-set, with a neat military bearing.
He's talking to Curtis LeMay, who's the head of the United States Air Force and in charge of the United States nuclear weapons strategy.
Odd bedfellows, you might think. What brings them together?
And they probably crossed paths because LeMay, in addition to those other things, was on the board of National Geographic.
Bishop is a globe-trotting climber. A connection with National Geographic makes sense in his case. But what's LeMay's interest? We'll let Jeffrey explain.
National Geographic is this venerable magazine that was started in the early 1900s and had different connections to the U.S. government because they often were sending explorers and journalists to far-flung corners of the world that the U.S. government wanted more information on. So LeMay and Bishop are at this cocktail party and they're talking, and Bishop tells LeMay about these dreamy views that the top of Mount Everest afforded and how he could stand at the summit of Everest and gaze out across Tibet and hundreds of miles of China and just how breathtaking and awe-inspiring that was. And LeMay starts thinking, that's exactly what we need. We need to be up there. That's the place we should put the sensor.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
Picture this. Me, Reese Witherspoon, in London, ordering fish and chips so often they might start wrapping me in paper. I'm traveling with my Wells Fargo autographed Journey card, so I earn rewards wherever I book travel. 5 times points with hotels, 4 times with airlines, 3 times on restaurants and other travel, and 1 point on other purchases. Imagine getting rewarded for eating a toad in the hole. Wait, what is a toad in a hole?
Visit wellsfargo.com/autograph journey. Terms apply.
Before long, the CIA reached out to Barry Bishop. He was one of the most famous mountaineers in the world and a former member of the U.S. Air Force. Capable and patriotic. Who better than him to lead this sensitive mission?
Things started moving really fast. So from Bishop's files, we could see that he was activated sometime in late 1964. He makes a number of trips. He meets experts about the Himalayas.
But there was a hitch. Bishop's heroic expedition to Everest had cost him dearly. Frostbite had claimed all of his toes and the tip of a finger. His own climbing days were behind him. He needed a team.
The CIA went to him and said, we need the best mountain climbers out there who we can trust. Again, this is a pretty small world of people that have that experience at high altitudes, who've survived at 24, 25, 26,000 feet. So Bishop began to look at the whole mountain climbing scene, and for a handful of people he could trust with a very important secret of the U.S. government. And he met some people in Colorado. He turned to some of the men that he had climbed Mount Everest with, and he ends up finding 5 or 6 people who take a vow of secrecy, and their mountaineering skills are without doubt.
The first among them was Jim McCarthy, a lawyer working in New York City, with a hobby that took him a long way from the office.
McCarthy was a young man at the time. He was a very talented rock climber. There's pictures of him in Sports Illustrated from the late 50s hanging off a cliff face. He's a smart, educated guy, but he had this passion of loving to be hanging upside down or scaling a rock face, and he was really good at it. He was the first person that Bishop recruited, and the two of them are communicating about all the different people they want to get involved, the equipment they need, the locations they want to go to, and he was really instrumental into setting up the operation.
Of course, this was an operation of 2 halves.
The CIA needed India's help. It would have been too difficult to try to sneak in a team of people with all that equipment without the Indians knowing. And the Indians also had a mutual interest in figuring out what was happening across the border with China's nuclear program. So at very high levels, the CIA and the Indian government communicated, and the head of India's intelligence service agreed to do this mission. And so the Indian government kind of built a mirror image of what the U.S. government did, of finding its best climbers that they could trust with a very important secret.
Barry Bishop's counterpart on the Indian side was Captain M.S. Coley, a veteran climber who had scaled his first peaks before hitting his teens.
Coley is a really interesting character. He's a gentleman. He was a naval officer. He came from a high caste. He was well educated. His manners were very elegant, and his vocabulary was expansive. He's a good talker. He's used to being the boss. And he was recruited because he had this mountain climbing experience and had already been vetted by the Indian military as somebody they could trust. He became the head of the Indian side of the mission. And even though all this technology and the nuclear device had been built in American labs, top secret laboratories doing these type of things, it was Coley who was in charge of figuring out the route, the logistics, the practicalities of getting a team of climbers up that mountain and leaving behind this device.
While the Indian team would be essential to the mission, the CIA was still the senior partner. They saw fit to withhold certain information from their opposite numbers in New Delhi.
The Indians weren't given nearly as much information as the Americans about the device, the technology, the logistics of how all this equipment would work.
That included the very present dangers of handling the radioactive material that powered the snap generator.
I think there was preliminary information about possible risks because some of the people we talked to told us that they had been carefully schooled in how to handle the plutonium capsules that formed the core of this device. This was brand new science, and I think there was a lot of question marks about the risks that a device like this could pose to the people around it.
More on that to come. But in the early stages of planning, Bishop was optimistic. He'd gathered his team and identified the mountain that would serve as an icy, unmanned talent station. Kanchenjunga,
which is the 3rd highest mountain in the world and really, really hard to climb. And initially the CIA thought, we got to get to the top of that mountain. We need that height. The higher up we can put the sensor, the longer its range is, extending for hundreds of miles across China. And so there was this scramble to put together this mission in early 1965 to get to the top of Kanchenjunga.
Things were moving fast. Fast enough to breed the kind of blue sky thinking that so often butts against the practical.
And it was sometime in the spring of 65, the Indian government said, no, we're not going to allow you to do that. It's too sensitive of an area. And some of the climbers who were initially asked to participate were relieved because they thought there's no way we're going to get to the top of Kanchenjunga with all this fancy and heavy equipment. It's impossible.
Then, around the same time, China detonated a second bomb. The pressure on the mission was rising.
So at some point in the spring of '65, the target of the mission switched to another mountain, Nanda Devi.
Like Kanchenjunga, Nanda Devi offered panoramic views into China from inside India's borders. Captain Coley, for his part, still had his doubts. The mountain was certainly no picnic. But the CIA insisted that the mission move ahead. Sidelined from the action on the mountainside, Barry Bishop channeled his energies into covert paperwork.
They needed something that would explain the presence of all these top flight climbers showing up together in India and disappearing into the Himalayas. And so the CIA and Bishop constructed this elaborate cover story. And I saw it through the checks I found and the phony business cards and the fake letterhead. And they presented this as a scientific mission. And they were telling the Indian government that this was their reason for doing it. They were telling academic organizations across the United States that they were doing this special climb to observe how the human body functions at high altitude. And they were going to study the environment and the effects of high altitude on climbers. And it was this very detailed subterfuge that Bishop built, and they maintained that to the end.
Meanwhile, the climbing teams, American and Indian, began to prepare for the ascent.
So there were several steps that were taken before they actually got to Nanda Devi. The first one was doing a practice run in Alaska, where they went to Mount McKinley, which is a very difficult mountain to climb and known for very hostile weather. And the Indians and Americans together for the first time did a practice run of trying to install this equipment at a high altitude. It wasn't nearly as difficult as what they would face in the Himalayas, but it was a good taste of how to use this equipment and work together.
But again, certain aspects of the operation were, from the CIA's point of view, strictly need to know.
The Americans also received special secret training at a lab in Baltimore that made the nuclear device. How to load it, how to unload it, what to watch out for, how to carry the device. The Indians were not part of that. That was just for the Americans. The Americans also received explosive training in North Carolina at a secret facility where special forces and intelligence agents are trained in spycraft. And they learned how to blow up poles and rock in case they needed to do that to install the poles to support all this equipment. And there was also lots of meetings and paperwork going between everybody involved. And I just got the sense that when they arrived in India in September 1965, they were pretty prepared for this very ambitious climb they were about to make.
If you've spent much time with us here on True Spies, you'll be aware that intelligence is often slow-going, the work of years and months of training, relationship building, and research. By comparison, this mission has gone from conception to execution in less than a year.
September is a very late time to start an ambitious climb of one of the world's tallest peaks. The weather's beginning to change. It's getting windier, colder, snowier. That cuts down on visibility. It makes it much more dangerous as you ascend. The conditions get to the point where you can't even see. You could slip off the side of the mountain and fall thousands of feet down. It's pure ice and rock up there. Nobody would survive. And so there was this urgency to get eyes on China, come hell or high water. And reading through all this information about the mission, you just get the sense that it was rushed. You just get the sense that there's like this firm hand pushing these people up the mountain at the wrong time.
The mission began among the villages that cluster at the foot of Nanda Devi. Even these early stages were less than auspicious.
There was so much friction on this mission between the Indians and the Americans. They had different concepts of how to climb a mountain. They did everything differently from how they would put in an ice screw or carry things up. And it was almost like the mission had two heads, because the CIA was driving it and knew all the ins and outs of this equipment and the nuclear device and what they needed to do, yet the Indians were kind of in charge of getting the climbers up the mountain step by step. And there was a lot of disagreement about how to make certain decisions. And I think even the personalities rubbed against each other. Coley was, as I was saying, like very elegant, reserved, erudite. And McCarthy was aggressive and pugnacious and combative. And so I think from the earliest moments of the mission, there were personality differences.
But the climbers will have more than infighting to deal with.
And the American and top Indian climbers are flown in by a helicopter to what they call the sanctuary, which is this meadow at the base of Nanda Devi at about 17,000 feet. The peak of Nanda Devi is 26,000 feet. And so for the next few days, the climbers are getting acclimated, or they're trying to, but they really don't have a lot of time. And if you go from sea level to 18,000 feet, you're hit with altitude sickness.
Pushing through the overwhelming nausea, pushing down their personal disagreements, the team makes their way skyward.
And they set up camps, several camps. They have their base camp, Camp 1, Camp 2, Camp 3, Camp 4, going higher and higher up to the sharpest point of the mountain. And at the top, after Camp 5, is the summit. And the goal was to install the device up there.
By the middle of October, the climbers have hauled the weighty surveillance gear most of the way up Nanda Devi. Steadily, conditions grow worse. Freezing cold permeates the thin air, and the snow falls in thick blankets. At night, the Indian porters, hired to move the plutonium batteries, snuggle against them, unaware of the danger basking in their radioactive warmth. And then, breaking point.
Just as the mission is coming to a climax, with dozens of men spread out at different camps on the mountain, and all the equipment at Camp 4 ready for a final push to Camp 5, a blizzard hits. The sky drops down so you can't see anything. It's snowing furiously. The winds howl. They rip tents off the mountain and blow them down where they're never found again. It's crazy up there. And as Coley and McCarthy are at advanced base camp, they're communicating by radio to climbers at the top. And the climbers at the top are saying they can't see anything.
Captain Coley makes the decision. Abort mission. Come down. Leave the equipment. Jim McCarthy can't believe his ears.
McCarthy explodes as he hears Coley give these orders. He yells at him, "What are you doing? You can't leave that device up there. It's dangerous. You got to bring it down." And Coley just kind of blows him off and gives the orders, "Come down, leave the equipment up there." McCarthy knew, or he says he knew, that it was dangerous to do that they might lose this thing, and that there was this substantial amount of highly radioactive material.
Not the kind of thing you'd want to leave laying around.
I don't think Coley appreciated the dangers this device posed to anybody around it. He was not given the briefings or the training that the American climbers were given. But the debate was, could you come down the mountain with the equipment? That's what McCarthy was saying. He wasn't saying, keep the climbers up there. He agreed, bring everybody down. But his point is, this generator weighed 50 pounds. McCarthy had been trained to handle it, to hold it, to load it, to unload it. And his insistence to this day, 60 years later, is the climbers should have just picked up the boxes and the packs with this stuff and made their way down with it.
But in the end, McCarthy relents.
He also knows that this is a crazy mission late in the climbing cycle, that the weather's not going to get any better, that they had given it their best shot.
It's over.
The climbers then leave the mountain. The equipment's still up there at Camp 4. Everybody evacuates from the mountain. There's no other way to climb it that year.
Spring, 1966. Nanda Devi. The search for the abandoned equipment is on, and the CIA are hoping against hope for an easy retrieval. They haven't given up on eventually completing this mission, despite its initial failure.
They send up another team. Same kind of group, part American, part Indian. They climb all the way up the mountain to Camp 4. It's the spring, conditions are better. And when they get to Camp 4, these guys get the shock of their lives.
It's the Paradise Podcast.
I am your host, Ryan Michelle Bethay, with my husband, Sterling.
What's up?
Join us here on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus, where we'll discuss each episode with the cast and crew of Paradise. I'll be getting all the secrets from Dan Fogelman, James Marsden, Shailene Woodley, Julianne Nicholson, and Sterling Kelby-Brown. Woo! Paradise, the official podcast, is now streaming.
And stream Paradise on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus.
It's gone. It's all gone.
Just blank ice and snow. No packs, no boxes, no generator, no sensor, no wires, nothing. They panic. They don't know what happened to it.
They have a working hypothesis, but that's no consolation.
The theory is that an avalanche had happened that winter and sheared off part of the mountain, and all that equipment that had been carefully stored at Camp 4. And Camp 4 isn't like a camp, it's just a space, kind of like a flat shelf as you're heading up to the peak. And the thought is that this avalanche sheared part of the mountain off, and all that equipment came tumbling down and is buried somewhere in the glacier.
But the CIA won't admit defeat.
The CIA didn't give up. They kept looking for this device. They used the best technology they had at the time. Infrared scopes, heat sensors, Geiger counters to see if there was any radioactivity they could pick up. They were desperate to find this generator. They didn't want it falling into the wrong hands.
Remember, despite the relatively benign purpose of this hunk of plutonium, it's still plutonium.
This was premium technology and also nuclear material that could be repurposed for a nuclear weapon.
It's possible that instead of monitoring the nuclear capability of an adversary, this material might actually give it a boost. If that happens, heads will roll at CIA headquarters. And that might be the least of America's worries.
So they kept looking for the device. They never found it. They sent up several more teams to look in the mountain. That area didn't find it.
And they never did. Quite aside from the glaring national security issue, there could be other, more insidious consequences to the loss of the generator. Remember, this device only works because plutonium is unstable. In very basic terms, that means it gives off radiation. And even without a degree in nuclear physics, you know that's bad news. The canisters that powered it were shielded, albeit not half so much as they should have been, if you ask Jim McCarthy, who later blamed a testicular cancer diagnosis on his proximity to them. But if that shielding were to break, over years, say, under several tons of pressure from rock, snow, and ice, the consequences could be catastrophic.
Because where they were trying to install the device, at the top of the Himalayas, is a source of the Ganges. That snow melts and feeds tributaries that get bigger and bigger and ultimately empty into the Ganges River, which hundreds of millions of people survive off of.
None of this stopped the CIA from trying again. More than once.
They were determined to complete a mission like this, so they started looking for other mountains. So while one team is on Nanda Devi looking for this first device, another team has a second device, identical, all the same equipment, and they're trying to install it on a nearby mountain. And finally, at the end of the 60s, they succeed in getting the equipment installed. It gets covered with snow, it stops working. It was kind of flawed technology. And at the same time, as the 60s progress into the 70s, there's a whole advent of spy satellites that cover the planet and can pick up all kinds of signals from space. So by the time this mountaineering mission finally produces a result and they manage to install the sensor on a nearby mountaintop, the technology is obsolete.
Millions of dollars, hundreds of terrifying man-hours, and a potential environmental disaster later, it was all for next to nothing. Just another tragic excess of Cold War brinkmanship. If you're running an intelligence agency, this is exactly the kind of thing you never want to get out. So why are you hearing about it now?
So this mission was secret for years and years. And it wasn't until 1978 that a journalist, Howard Cohn, who was working for Rolling Stone magazine and a smaller publication called Outside magazine, got in touch with some climbers based on some rumors and whispers he had heard in Washington, and he put together what happened up there. And he published the story in Outside, and it was like a bombshell.
For more than a decade, news of the Nanda Devi mission's catastrophic failure had been kept secret. Now, it sent shockwaves through Washington.
When this story broke in 1978, it was news to the Carter administration. And there's correspondence from the Secretary of State saying that the story in Outside magazine appears to be true. And the facts are the CIA lost a device in the Himalayas with a substantial amount of plutonium. That was big news to the Carter administration. They hadn't been tracking this. This is in 1965, several administrations before them. And so they now have to deal with trying to assess how dangerous it is, how upset India is going to be, and what this means for the geopolitics of the region.
They were right to be concerned.
Cohn's story in 78 gave a glimpse of what happened. He didn't go to India. He didn't talk to any of the Indian climbers. He had some information that wasn't exactly right, but it exposed the basic facts, which were that the CIA had tried to plant a device in the Himalayas to spy on China, and they lost the device. And that provoked panic in India. When that story hit, there were protests on the streets of New Delhi.
The Indian government, much of which had been kept in the dark by their own spy agency, summoned the American ambassador. This was a full-blown diplomatic incident.
India's parliament demanded an investigation. It just created this frenzy of concern of where is this device? What does it mean for us? Could it poison the whole Ganges water system? They were like, this is a danger to our most sacred river, to our lifeblood of this country. Carter had no idea this mission even had happened. He goes to the CIA, they tell him it's true, and then there's all this correspondence between Carter and his aides about how to do damage control, basically how to keep it secret, but work with the Indians to placate them that there isn't that high degree of danger and that they'll try to help figure out what to do about this.
The story could scarcely have come at a worse time.
This is just a few months before the Soviets are going to roll into Afghanistan. Cold War's really intense at that moment, and the United States is just looking across this landscape, trying to put out all these fires across the world, and they don't want a new one, which is India being furious about a botched mission with missing plutonium.
Damage control, of the reputational sort, is the number one concern.
They try to make it go away. The Americans encourage the Indians not to disclose this publicly. The Indians disagree with that. They have hearings in Parliament. They tell the Indian public the basic facts, that a device was lost in the Himalayas.
It could have been much worse. In an address to Parliament, Morarji Desai, the Indian Prime Minister, holds back from directly blaming the US government or its foreign intelligence agency. He reassures the public that there is no cause for alarm.
They set up a commission to study the snowmelt in the rivers and to look for whatever they can find about where this device might be that doesn't produce anything.
In June of 1978, Prime Minister Desai traveled to America to meet with President Carter.
Some of this has now been exposed in these memorandums and secret files that were all classified, that aren't classified anymore. And Carter and the Prime Minister of India have this long, expansive conversation about the Soviets in Afghanistan and the Cubans in Ethiopia and lots of Cold War politics and nuclear proliferation. And guess what comes up at that meeting? This device. And Carter thanks the Indian Prime Minister for helping manage this crisis. And he says, I'm glad neither of us were directly involved with it. And then they try to move on, but it never quite goes away.
Time and time again, parts of the story resurface, just as they did in 2018, when Jeffrey Gettleman's curiosity was piqued by a scattering of words in an Indian newspaper. Just as it has for you, listening now. But the CIA has never issued a statement about what it euphemistically referred to in its archives as the Nanda Devi affair.
I don't know why the CIA and the American government are still so reluctant to deal with this. I think there's a way they could send people, use new technology, make a better effort to try to find where the device is, recover it, deactivate it. From a lot of experts we talk to, that's not beyond the realm of possibility. But there may be a reluctance to officially acknowledge this mission. And that may just be a broad practice among the intelligence agencies of the U.S. government and the government itself, that they don't want to take responsibility for all the things they've done in the past, because that would be a never-ending, bottomless pit of cleanups and admissions of guilt and disclosure of secret operations that they want to keep secret decades later.
Jeffrey hopes that one day that'll change.
We always hope that what we write has some impact. That's why we put all the time and energy into it. I hope it catalyzes a conversation. I think it's kind of sad that there's this thing out there that could be dangerous that nobody's really trying to find. I think from all the research we've done, it's not safe to have that much radioactive material unaccounted for. It's not. And so I hope that the work we did, bringing some light to this crazy mission that's almost unbelievable that it ever happened, I hope there's some more interest in getting to the bottom of it.
For the men who are on Nanda Devi, every eye on this story counts.
I got the sense from Captain Coley and Jim McCarthy, one of the American climbers, the last living American climber, that they felt betrayed. They felt that they were used, that they were treated as a disposable item to be tasked with a certain mission and then discarded for the rest of their lives.
We'd like to thank Jeffrey and the team at the New York Times for sharing this story with us. You'll find the full version of this report on their website, headlined, "How Did the CIA Lose a Nuclear Device?" You should keep an eye out for a members-only interview on SPYSCAPE Plus, which explores more of the investigative sleuthing that made the story possible. Subscribe now at plus.spyscape.com. Join us next time for another dip into murky waters on True Spies. Disclaimer. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the subject. These stories are told from their perspective, and their authenticity should be assessed on a case-by-case basis. If you're enjoying this podcast, please click now to give it a 5-star rating or leave a review. Ratings and reviews help people discover the podcast and help us bring you more great stories. And if you have some time, why not forward the podcast to a friend?
Porn is everywhere. Millions stream it every day, yet nobody seems to know who really controls the business. I'm Alex Barker. I'm a journalist at the Financial Times. Years ago, my fellow reporter Patricia Nielsen and I started digging into the porn industry to find out how the money flows. And in our new audiobook, The Kink Machine, The Hidden Business of Adult Entertainment, you'll hear our investigation into the power and influence that drives the most taboo corners of the internet. Find The Kink Machine, The Hidden Business of Adult Entertainment at pushkin.fm/audiobooks or at Audible, Spotify, or wherever you get your audiobooks.